So I didn't actually get to watch the Arsenal game this weekend, which is really annoying for me because I wanted to be able to watch it, especially at this stage of the season. And I think following along with it on my phone was more stressful than if I'd just been able to actually follow along the game live, seeing it as it happens. But the moment comes when I see West Ham have scored the equalizer, heart sinks, everything's terrible, and then VAR comes along and saves us. Should we win the next two games, I think Chris Kavanagh should also be extended an invitation to the title parade. I think he's earned it. Um, but the moment it got ruled out, I kind of knew immediately, oh man, the internet's going to go insane about this one. And it has. And the way it all went down, I still haven't entirely decided what I think about it. Because it's definitely an iffy one. I think every team throughout a season is going to both benefit and lose out on things on the fact of calls that are contentious. Sometimes bad calls go your way, sometimes they don't, and throughout a league season they tend to even out. Man City benefited from some contentious calls the day before in their match, so I guess title race wise, it kind of sort of evens out, maybe. Though for West Ham, that's a lot more devastating. But getting into the call itself, we have David Raya go up, try to catch the ball. He doesn't quite manage to do that, bounces out of his hands, at which point there is an opportunity for Callum Wilson to shoot. He takes it, scores, and there's generally, I think, agreement that it was in fact a foul. The outrage seems to be more involved with the fact of what goes on with corners and stuff Arsenal's kind of pioneered in a sense. I think every team now pretty much does a lot of weird shenanigans on corners. They've fully taken advantage of the fact that when you have so many people crowded in a small space together, that you can get away with a lot more stuff. And so grappling and holding and fouling is very common in corners. Almost every corner you watch this season, there are probably two or three things you can pick out where you think, yeah, someone's getting fouled there. And this is just the standard, which suggests the Premier League does have a problem. And even on this corner, you had players that did seem to be being held and grappled, and maybe penalties should have been awarded. But as for the actual foul, I think it is actually different to a lot of what Arsenal has benefited from on corners this season, in that Arsenal does this thing on corners where they kind of foul you without officially fouling you. The best way I can put it is if you've watched the NFL, there was a coach named Bill Belichick who became very good at kind of using the rules to his advantage and figuring out how to do things that were just about legal without officially breaking a rule, but was certainly iffy. I think Arsenal's done that a lot. Because we'll do a lot of standing in the way of the goalkeeper, at which point you can say, well, the player's just standing there, and players are allowed to do that, even if they're standing in the way of the keeper. One thing Arsenal players don't really do that much is actually grab the keeper. Usually they'll grab every other player in the box, but not the keeper. And the keeper in general, goalkeepers are protected more. And I don't mind that they are. I think it's a good thing. The goalkeeping it's a different position to everything else. It is such a different thing to the entire rest of what's going on in football. It is a very unique position and also a very important one because it's the last line of defense. And if you get in the way of a goalkeeper's chance to make a save, then you're probably going to concede a goal. And so goalkeepers perhaps have to be more protected than other players. And that's probably why this call was made when other ones haven't been, is because goalkeepers are more protected. I was reading, I think it was The Guardian that said, referees love seeing shirts pulled because that's, a very clear, obvious thing that they can call. There's a lot of things you can kind of, mess about with and kind of do things that the ref won't entirely be able to call. And it's not an enviable position to be a referee with corners right now because there's so much going on with them and so much foul play that you like don't even know where to begin. But pulling the goalkeeper's shirt is a good way to like signify to the referee that something actually has gone wrong. Um, and that is where you can see why this goal was called off because not only is someone grabbing Raya's shirt from behind, but also like arm across his face, holding on to his arm as he goes up to try and claim the ball. And I still don't know how much that actually affected his ability to catch the ball because it still looks like he got up fine, got his hands to it, and just didn't make the catch. But at the same time, when you're being pulled from behind and have an arm that's like someone is like grabbing you here, I could see how that would mess up your ability to catch the ball. And in that sense, it probably is the right call to call it off. But then you get to what Arsenal does on corners. And as I said, like we don't grab the keeper. We recognize that the keeper is a protected position to where they're usually the only ones we're not yet, like fully throttling on corners. Um, but there have still been a few ones. The ones I've seen most commonly brought up are against Aston Villa in January and Man United in the opening game of the season. And even then, they're not exactly the same because they're not grabbing the players. I guess Saliba does kind of like get his arm onto Bayender in the beginning of the season, but not by the time the ball's actually swung in. Um, Still looks like he kind of got in the way and prevented him from being able to make the save to the best of his ability. I would not have complained really if that had been called off. And the same thing with Martinez. I remember at the time there was a whole thing about like Martinez saying he got elbowed, and he didn't get elbowed. It doesn't look like, but the Gabriel's elbow was in his face at the very least, even if contact wasn't actually made, and that can affect your ability to make a save or get to the ball. Um, and so I do get the frustration. I kind of like I can understand and see why the decisions that have been made were made. Um, I think that like you can legitimately argue this was a different thing to what often happens, but I think in general corner kicks have become this like absolute mess of bodies where every player knows that they can get away with more stuff and that's not necessarily the best for it. And I think over the summer, the Premier League's going to have to think very hard about how they're going to instruct refs to handle corner kick situations in the next season because this, if nothing else, has given a lot of bad press to the Premier League. Um, so we'll see how they do that, if they do that, because it does seem like there's a spot that's not a very fun time to be a referee with that, and also like an area that clubs have figured out how to exploit. And so there probably do need to be changes and it needs to be like fully thought out and considered. I don't really know what the solution is, but there is something quite fitting about this season potentially coming down to a 5-minute VAR check about something that goes on with the mess of bodies in a corner kick.